Montana in summer. With an artist who lives surrounded by the very things he loves to paint, the magnificent landscapes and the abundant wildlife of his adopted state. This is Daniel Smith, and to him, Montana is full of memorable moments any time of year.
There's quite a few reasons why we moved to Montana. From the art standpoint, it's a phenomenal resource for my landscapes, for the wildlife. Montana is probably one of the richest resource states for my type of work that there is. Between the national parks here and the great open lands and the great diversity of wildlife, I just think it's a phenomenal resource. The wealth of information for me, the bison, elk, mule deer, white-tailed deer, black bears, you know, you pretty much name it. And of course the new wolf population that I've been involved with. Lots of sources of inspiration for me. So that was a big draw for me, just being closer to the subject matter. Landscape-wise, I just have had a romance with the West and the mountains. I really wanted to paint the mountains, and I really think the only way you can do that and truly have that become a part of you and your art is to live and experience it on a daily basis. It has to become a part of you, be in your blood, be in your spirit and your soul. And really the only way to get that is to live what you're painting, I think. Let's go. Let's go. Attaboy. And being out here, you know, it's fun, quote, unquote, because so much of this is fresh to me. I've got fresh landscapes. I've got fresh subjects. Things that I haven't painted, things that I haven't studied. And it's exhilarating.
Dan, in mid-career, has a large body of award-winning work to his credit. Dan is also a family man, and his never-ending study of wildlife is a daily event in the Smith home. Here, Dan advises his son, Adam, about his artistic moments. As with his son, Dan freely shares with us many other aspects of his creative process.
The tools of my trade, there are a few things that I am very particular about, and one is my detail brushes, and I personally use a brand that's a French brand called Heinz Scharf, and I don't use anything smaller than the number 3, which is a fairly large brush that holds a fair amount of paint, but it keeps a razor-sharp point so I can get the kind of detail and accuracy that I really need and want in my finished art. One of the most intimidating things to me is a blank white canvas sitting in front of me. The first couple of days are tough for me getting into a new piece, but once I establish kind of some rhythm and things start to materialize, I become more and more involved in the piece, and then it really becomes passion. Then it's hard to get away from it, and I want to keep going, and it's hard to put the brush down. Well, technically, a lot of times my compositions really come from the gut. I don't like to restrict myself to rules and regulations of standard proven compositions. And a lot of times I just find myself designing pieces and putting things together that feel right and that kind of come from within. What I try to share with the viewer is a mood, and for the most part that mood has been a fairly peaceful, quiet mood in most of my works. Most of my subjects are fairly passive. I want people to experience the peace, the tranquility of the wilderness, being out there, being the only one out there, communing with nature. I just have kind of a delicate touch, and it's just the way I work, it's my process, I work with subtleties a lot, and people seem to respond to it. I'm not real bold and brash with my colors or lighting. I try to keep things fairly muted and soft. My creative process at this point in my career is finding a landscape that really strikes an emotion or strikes a chord, and that usually is involved in capturing a mood or a special time. It's usually a fleeting moment that's not around very long. So I really try to work hard to get a landscape that invites the viewer in, that they feel like it's a place that they've been, something they can relate to. And that's the first thing that I look for. And the wildlife, as far as the focus, isn't really secondary because it's still a focus. But it seems to me that the landscape will dictate what type of wildlife goes in. If it calls for a bold, strong element, you know, maybe it calls for an ungulate like a moose or something like that. I'm working on a moose painting right now. Or sometimes I'm trying to create a balance between a soft landscape and a bold subject, or vice versa. So there's no real formula for the way I choose my subjects. It's kind of whatever strikes me and whatever seems to fit into that landscape. If I have a really soft mood, a lot of times I'm trying to come up with a fairly non-confrontational posture of my wildlife that goes into that piece. So there's harmony there. So that's always something that I'm thinking about as I'm composing the pieces. For negative space, I love to use snow. Wintertime is one of my favorite times because snow can just transform a busy landscape into just a wonderful three-dimensional black and white. I love monochromatic. I love not having a lot of color to deal with. Sometimes I like depicting forms and shapes and using soft light. Snow's a good element for that. I also use mist, fog, atmosphere, that sort of thing to help with negative space in landscapes.
Friendships among his artistic peers are another source of inspiration for Dan, since every artist needs an exchange of new ideas and techniques. Dan is fortunate to have a talented colleague named Paco Young.
And there are quite a few artists in the community out here, and Paco's my definite closest artist friend, and we do share a lot, spend a lot of time together critiquing each other's works. I like those nice subtle colors you're using.
Generally I use more color than this, really. This is a little more subdued, but with the...
Oh, it's a little bit, but it looks really nice.
The mist on the mountains, you know, it's nice to put it a little bit softer.
That's perfect.
Research is an ongoing process in Dan's work. His eyes search everywhere for locations that will allow him to capture his next painting's special moment.
Inspiration comes from so many different sources of wildlife, landscape, moods. My best inspirations come from being out in the field and experiencing things firsthand. And it's the natural world around me. There's so many things that I'm drawn to. It's hard to key in on any one thing, but since moving to Montana here, there's been many moments that I've been drawn into a scene, and a number of them I've already shared with viewers, and I've got hundreds that I will in the future. It's moments like that I really am drawn to and work towards and portraying in my finished piece of art. I do want to give people a sense of place, a sense of time. I want people to become a part of the painting. I want them to feel like they've been there. I think that's one of the things about a piece of art on somebody's wall is it's a little bit of an escape for them. It's somewhere they can go for a moment or several moments while they glance at it. And that's why the field research work is so important. And, I just don't think you can do a subject justice without spending the time in the field, knowing, habitat, knowing behaviors and interactions and getting things accurate and real. one thing I don't like to do is mimic what a camera sees. And it's done a lot in the art business, but your eye doesn't see that way, and that's one of the things about working with photographic reference. You've got to pick and choose what you want to use, and be cognizant of the fact that, you know, a photo is a photo, and it is not even close to what your eye sees. So I'm always careful about that, and that's one of the exercises about being out in the field and actually sketching or painting, that it helps you to discern the difference between what the camera sees and what your eye sees. And I do use the camera a lot because it records so much information in such a short period of time. But I also spend a lot of effort and time refining those photos, opening up shadow detail, adding highlight detail. My future for painting in Montana is to capture as much of what's around me, you know, subject-wise. Yeah, this is my buddy. I am going to be spending more time on horseback, and I think that's going to be an influence to my painting. I do my homework, and I get out there, and I got to be honest, it's the best part of my job. There are a number of reasons why I really like to paint wolves, but probably first and foremost is they're just such a social creature, and they relate so much to humans, the way that their social structure is. That there's a pack, and they share the responsibilities of taking care of the young, and they share the responsibilities for gathering food. They're just a highly intelligent animal that is just kind of the epitome of wildness for me. The other part that really fascinates me are there are a few sounds in the wild that are totally inspiring, and one of those is a wolf howling, loons calling, and maybe an elk bugling. There's a new sound that I'm getting more and more familiar with, but there's nothing that sends chills up your spine like a wolf howling in the wild. And that's something that not many people get a chance to experience. Actually, these guys are at a really great age, I think, for a piece of art, because they're starting to look wolfish, but they're still cute puppies. Is that a hint? You think I should cut it? You think I should cut it? I am fascinated by large predators. The big cats are extremely fascinating. You're making this tough, Buster. Felines are just, there's something about the way they move, their grace, their beauty, their muscle structure, that I'm just really drawn to. Oh, goodness. 5-day-old cougar cubs. I'm also fascinated with birds of prey and actually down into some of the smaller songbirds. They have their own delicate beauty and kind of portray another side of nature that's not as awesome and powerful. I like the serene, delicate nature of painting songbirds and the feeling it gives to the viewer and myself when I'm doing it. So there's not a whole lot in nature that I'm not fascinated with, and I'd probably even be into painting some of the smaller amphibians and insect life if I had the opportunity and the time. One of the problems is so many subjects, never enough time. Well, Yellowstone's a wealth of information for me. Lots of sources of inspiration coming out of Yellowstone. I'm always looking forward to my next project. It's what I live and breathe for. I'm always thinking several pieces down the road, actually. I've always liked to plan things, and sometimes I'll get an idea and I'll mull it over in my mind for 2-3 years or so before I'll actually try to execute that idea. In being an artist, I really think an integral part of it is being disciplined and being dedicated to what you do. It's not a job, really. It's a lifestyle. It's part of you. It's something that you experience every waking minute. Well, and when you sleep sometimes too. I do take time for my family, and that's about it. It seems like, but most everything else I do is centered around being an artist. I really want to improve on what I'm doing and be a better artist and be able to communicate even better to a greater audience. To be able to share with others my passion for the natural world through my artwork.